Diver Mikhail Sergeyev rose to the surface of the Svetlaya River and pulled his mask off his face. Drops of water ran down his cheeks, mixing with sweat. What he discovered at a depth of 12 meters made his hands tremble. A wooden boat lay on its side in a crevice of a flooded quarry. The sides were darkened by time, but the structure was surprisingly well preserved. Mikhail made out the number burned into the stern. Zaretye 7. 15 years ago, this boat disappeared along with a family of 4. August 22, 1995, was a hot and sunny day. The Romanov family was spending their last day of vacation in the village of Zaretye. Andrei worked as an engineer at a machine-building plant, and Elena taught elementary school at the local school. 12-year-old Maxim was preparing to start 7th grade, and 8-year-old Anya had just learned to swim. "Dad, can we go boating?" Anya tugged at her father's shirt sleeve, pointing to a small pier. Several wooden boats bobbed at the shore, waiting for tourists. Andrei looked at his wife. Elena smiled and nodded. There were 5 hours left before the train, enough time for a short trip. The boat owner, a tanned man in his 60s, introduced himself as Vasily Petrovich. He looked closely at the family, lingering on the children. "Life jackets are mandatory," he said sternly. "The current is calm here, but anything can happen." Andrei nodded and helped the children fasten their bright orange life jackets. Elena took a camera out of her bag and took several pictures. In one of them, the whole family is laughing, standing on a small bridge. It was the last picture where all 4 of them were alive. The boat Zaretye 7 cast off at 2:15 p.m. Vasily Petrovich waved to them from the shore and shouted, "Be back by 6. It'll start getting dark." The plan for the trip was simple. Go downstream to the old mill 3 kilometers from the village, look at the ruins, and come back. The whole trip was supposed to take no more than 3 hours. Andrei rowed steadily, enjoying the tranquility of the river. Elena read a book, occasionally looking up at the children. Maxim dangled his hand over the side of the boat, trying to catch small fish. Anya sang a song she had learned at summer camp. At 2:30 p.m., they were seen by the last witness, Ivan Kuzmik, a pensioner from a neighboring village, was fishing from the opposite bank. He remembered the family well. The children were laughing, the woman was waving, and the man was concentrating on rowing. The boat was moving precisely along the fairway, not approaching any dangerous shoals. There was nothing suspicious, he later told investigators. Just a normal family outing. I even envied them. My grandchildren live far away. But by 6 o'clock in the evening, the family had not returned. Vasily Petrovich was the first to become concerned. He knew the river like the back of his hand and understood that even at the slowest pace, it would take a maximum of 4 hours to reach the mill and return. At 6:30 p.m., the fishermen contacted the local police station. The officer on duty, Peter Volkov, took the report seriously. He knew the statistics on accidents on the water and understood that every minute could cost a life. "We'll organize a search immediately," he told Vasily Petrovich. What did they have with them? A small backpack, a thermos, a camera, and food for the day, sandwiches and apples. The fisherman listed. The man looked experienced, but still. By 7 p.m., a search party of 8 people began combing the riverbanks. It was difficult to work in the dark, but they continued until midnight, shining flashlights into the bushes and backwaters. No traces. The next morning, the search resumed with redoubled vigor. Local residents were joined by officers from the District Internal Affairs Department volunteers from neighboring villages, and dog handlers with service dogs. The river was divided into sections, and a systematic search began. Divers plunged into every deep pool, examining eddies and snags where a boat could have gotten stuck. At 3:20 p.m., on the second day of the search, the first discovery was made. "There's something here," shouted volunteer Nikolai Stepanov, pushing his way through the willow bushes 2 kilometers from the village. He pointed to a branch swaying over the water. A child's life jacket was hanging on a snag. Its bright orange color immediately caught the eye. The jacket was torn in several places, and the straps were broken. Vasily Petrovich confirmed that the jacket belonged to the Romanov family. He remembered how the little girl had been capricious, not wanting to wear it. "Anya," he whispered, examining the wet fabric. The find provided a new lead. If the life jacket was 2 kilometers from the starting point, then the boat had traveled farther than expected. The search shifted downstream, but nothing else was found. Divers searched the bottom for 15 kilometers. They found old tires, scrap metal, even the remains of a wartime truck. But there was no sign of a wooden boat or people. "The river couldn't have just swallowed them up," said search team leader Captain Andrei Belov. "Something's not right here." After a week of intensive searching, a new version of events emerged. Investigator Marina Kozlova studied the witness statements and came to an unexpected conclusion. The family could have left the boat voluntarily if their lives were in danger. "Let's say the boat started to sink," she reasoned aloud at a meeting. An adult man could have decided to swim to shore. The children were wearing life jackets, and the wife could swim too. But then, where were their bodies? The river is shallow at that point, and the current is weak. Even if someone drowned, the body would have floated to the surface within a few days. The search continued for another 3 weeks. A helicopter was brought in to survey the area from the air. All the forest trails within a 20-kilometer radius of the river were combed. The result was 0. By the end of September 1995, the investigation had reached a dead end. The official version was an accident on the water, resulting in the drowning of 4 people. The case was transferred to the archives with the label "Suspended until new information is received." No new information appeared for 15 years. Mikhail Sergeyev had been involved in underwater research since his youth. After serving in the Navy, he worked on oil rigs, participated in archaeological expeditions, and made documentary films about sunken ships. In the summer of 2010, he arrived in the Sverdlovsk region on assignment from a television company. A story about the underwater caves of the Urals was planned for the program The Unknown Nearby. There is an interesting site near the village of Zaretsky, local historian Oleg Morozov told him. "It's an old quarry that was flooded in the 1950s. It's up to 15 meters deep, and the water is crystal clear. They say there's a whole cave system down there." Mikhail was intrigued. The quarry was only half a kilometer from the Svetlaya River, connected to it by an underground channel. It was the perfect place to film. On July 17, 2010, he made his first dive. The water was indeed crystal clear. Mikhail could easily see the bottom at a depth of 12 meters. The walls of the quarry were cut by cracks and crevices, some of which disappeared into the darkness for many meters. He systematically surveyed the perimeter, taking photographs for his future film. In the northeastern part of the quarry, he discovered a particularly interesting crevice, a narrow but deep crack in the rock. Mikhail turned on his underwater flashlight and looked inside. What he saw made him forget about filming. In the crevice, At a depth of 12 meters, lay a wooden boat. It rested on its side, partially covered with silt and stones. The sides were darkened, but the wood was surprisingly well preserved. The cold water had preserved the find. Mikhail swam closer and made out the numbers burned into the stern. Zarechia 7. His heart began to beat faster. He had heard the story of the missing family from the locals, but hadn't given it much thought. You never know what people say in villages. But the boat was here, at the bottom of the quarry. Real, tangible. Mikhail cautiously peered inside the boat. A wet backpack lay on the bottom, with some items sticking out of it. Nearby were oars, a metal mug, and the remains of food in a plastic bag. He took a few photos and surfaced. "I need to call the police immediately," he muttered, pulling off his scuba gear. "This is material evidence." The duty officer at the local police station was skeptical about the call. Some diver claims to have found a boat that's 15 years old. Maybe it's a prank, but Mikhail insisted. He gave the exact coordinates of the find, described the number on the stern, and listed the items inside the boat. Such details couldn't be made up. By evening, an investigation team arrived at the quarry. A second dive confirmed the diver's words. The boat was indeed lying in a crevice, and everything pointed to it being the Zarechia 7, the Romanov family's vessel. How could it have ended up here? Wondered investigator Igor Krotov as he studied the photographs. The quarry is not directly connected to the river. There is an underground channel, Mikhail explained, but it is very narrow. It would be practically impossible to drag a boat of that size through it. However, the facts spoke for themselves. The boat was in the quarry, which meant that it had somehow got there from the river. The next day, professional divers brought the find to the surface. An examination confirmed that it was indeed the boat Zarechia 7, rented by the Romanov family on August 22, 1995. Inside, they found many of the family's personal belongings. A backpack contained documents belonging to Andrei and Elena Romanov, children's toys, and leftover food. Elena's notebook with the phone numbers of relatives and colleagues was found in a wet jacket pocket. But the most important find was a folded piece of paper tucked under one of the seats. Mikhail carefully unfolded the damp paper. The ink had smudged, but the text was still legible. It was a note written in Andrei Romanov's hurried handwriting. "If anyone finds this, we have gone north on foot." The boat sprang a leak near the old mill. Elena was injured in the fall. Look for us in the direction of the forestry. Note 2395, A. Romanov. The note was dated the day after they disappeared. This meant that the family was alive for at least a day after their disappearance. They left the sinking boat and set off on foot to seek help. Why didn't anyone find them in the forest? Investigator Krotov asked the participants in the 1995 search. The forestry office is only 10 kilometers from the river. Petr Volkov, a former duty officer, now a retired major, spread his arms. "We searched the entire area, but the main forces were concentrated along the river. It was logical to assume that, in the event of an accident, they would remain close to the water. Indeed, the 1995 search was conducted mainly along the banks of the Svetlaya River. The forest areas to the north were searched superficially by small groups of volunteers. Now the investigation has taken a new direction. If the family really did head north to the abandoned forestry station, there may still be traces of their presence there. Even after 15 years. A group of 8 people set off for the forest on July 25, 2010. It included investigator Krotov, 2 operatives, a dog handler with a service dog, a local gamekeeper, and 3 volunteer searchers. The old forestry station consisted of dilapidated buildings deep in a spruce forest. The main house had long since lost its roof, and the walls were riddled with holes where windows had been knocked out. Nearby stood sheds, a bathhouse, and several outbuildings. "It's a remote place," remarked gamekeeper Vladimir Somov. "If they really made it here, they would have spent more than a day. You can't survive in the forest in winter." The search of the buildings began with the main house. In one of the rooms, they found traces of recent, by forest standards, human habitation, the remains of a fire in a makeshift hearth, several tin cans, and scraps of fabric. However, it was difficult to date the finds. Mushroom pickers, hunters, and tourists periodically visited the forest. Any of them could have left these traces. The breakthrough came on the second day of the search. Dog handler Sergei Makarov worked with a German shepherd named Alma. The dog was specially trained to search for old traces and could distinguish smells even after many years. In the bathhouse, Alma began to show signs of restlessness. She whined, scratched the floor with her paws, and pointed her nose to the far corner of the room. Someone was definitely here, Makarov said. And they were here for a long time. Investigator Krotov ordered a thorough search of the bathhouse. Under a layer of rotten leaves and trash, they found several more tin cans, the remains of a blanket, and a child's toy, a small plastic soldier, faded from time and dampness. They were exactly like the ones sold in stores in the mid-90s. "It could be anything," one of the operatives remarked skeptically. "Children often lose their toys in the woods." But gamekeeper Somov shook his head. "I've been walking here for 30 years. Until 2005, no one ever visited the forest. It's too far from the roads. If a toy is here, it appeared either a very long time ago or very recently." This meant that the trail could be linked to the Romanov family. The search in the forest continued for another week. The group combed the surrounding area within a 3-kilometer radius, examining every path and every clearing. On July 31st, a new discovery was made. Half a kilometer from the forest, in a small clearing among the birch trees, gamekeeper Somov noticed an unusual mound. The mound of earth and stones stood out against the flat surface of the clearing. "It looks like a grave," he said quietly to the investigator. Official excavations began the next day. The team was joined by Alexei Krylov, a forensic expert from the district hospital. A meter deep, the shovels struck the decayed remains of clothing. Deeper still, they found human bones. The examination showed that an adult woman aged 30-35 was buried in the grave. The cause of death was blood poisoning due to an open fracture of the tibia of the left leg. Among the remains of her clothing, they found Elena Romanova's personal belongings, an engagement ring engraved with A+S 15.06.85, a Luch watch, and gold earrings. Elena Romanova had been dead for 15 years. But where were the rest of the family? Further searches in the area around the clearing yielded no results. No traces of Andrei, Maxim, or Anya were found. Perhaps after their wife's death, they went to look for people, suggested investigator Krotov. But where? And why didn't they ask for help? There were many theories, but they all boiled down to one question. Where were the 3 surviving Romanovs now? A nationwide search was launched. The descriptions of Andrei, Maxim, and Anya were entered into the Interior Ministry's database. Hospitals, orphanages, and social services were checked. After a month of searching, the first response came. The call came from Yekaterinburg on September 15, 2010. Local police officer Roman Petukov reported that a man who looked very similar to the wanted Andrei Romanov was living in his district. His name is Andrei Nikitin, he reported by phone. He works as a warehouse guard. He lives alone, but his neighbors say he used to have children, a son and a daughter. Investigator Krotov left for Yekaterinburg that same day. Andrei Nikitin lived in an old house on the outskirts of the city, in a small room in a communal apartment. When there was a knock at the door, he did not open it for a long time. "Andrei Alexeyevich?" asked the investigator when the door finally opened slightly. The man on the threshold had gray hair and looked haggard, but his features were recognizable. It was indeed Andrei Romanov. He nodded silently and stepped back into the room. "I knew you would come," he said quietly, sinking into the only chair. "I've been waiting for this day for 15 years. His hands trembled as he lit a cigarette. His eyes revealed the pain he had carried all these years. "Where are your children?" asked the investigator. "They're alive," replied Andrei. "And they don't know the truth." What happened to the Romanov family in those woods? Why did Andrei hide for 15 years? And what terrible secret was he keeping from his own children? Investigator Krotov turned on the tape recorder and placed it on the worn table between himself and Andrei. The communal apartment smelled of tobacco smoke and loneliness. "Tell me what happened on August 22nd, 1995, he asked calmly. Andrei took a drag on his cigarette and closed his eyes. He had been preparing for this conversation for 15 years, but the words still came with difficulty. "We were sailing to the mill, as planned," he began in a quiet voice. "The children were happy. Elena was taking pictures. It was a normal family outing." He paused, gathering his thoughts. The sounds of the city drifted in through the window. Car horns, children shouting in the yard, dogs barking. Life went on, but he was stuck in that August day forever. "The problem started near the mill," Andrei continued. "The boat started taking on water. I didn't notice right away. The children were splashing around, distracting me. When I realized, the water was already covering the bottom." The investigator took notes without interrupting. He could see that the man was telling the truth. The pain in his eyes was too real to be fake. "I tried to reach the shore, but the current carried us toward the rapids." Andrei nervously crumpled a pack of cigarettes. Elena was scared and grabbed Anya. "Maxim helped me row, but the boat was sinking." The rapids near the old mill were well known to local fishermen. They were shallow but had sharp rocks and a strong current. For a sinking boat, it was a deadly trap. I shouted for everyone to leave the boat. Andrei's voice trembled. The children were wearing life jackets. They should have been able to swim. Elena could swim too. But he fell silent, breathing heavily. The investigator waited patiently for him to continue. Elena jumped in first to help Anna, but she hit a rock. I heard a crack, a scream. When I got to her, she couldn't stand up. Her leg was broken. The picture of the tragedy gradually became clearer. The family had left the sinking boat, but Elena was seriously injured. In the cold water, far from people, this was becoming a critical problem. The children swam to shore. I dragged Elena. Andrei continued. She lost consciousness from the pain. We somehow made it to shallow water. "Why didn't you go back to the village for help?" asked the investigator. Andrei smiled bitterly. "Have you seen these places? It's 5 kilometers across the water from the mill to Zarechi, but 15 on foot through the forest, and I had a wife with an open fracture and 2 frightened children." The logic was clear. Andrei decided to seek help at the nearest place, an abandoned forestry office. It was only 3 kilometers away through the forest. I made a stretcher out of branches and jackets, he said. Maxim helped carry it, and Anya walked alongside. Elena would regain consciousness and then lose it again. The journey to the forestry office took almost the entire day. Andrei stopped frequently to let the children rest. Elena moaned in pain with every movement. By evening, we reached the forestry office. Andrei rubbed his face with his hands. We built a fire in the bathhouse. It was drier there. I knew we needed medicine and a doctor. But I couldn't leave my family alone in the forest. The investigator nodded. The decision was understandable, though tragic. Instead of going for help, Andrei stayed with his family. I thought someone would find us, the man continued. We heard helicopters and voices in the distance. We shouted and lit smoky fires. But the searchers were walking along the river, and we were off to the side. The family spent 3 days in an abandoned forest bathhouse. Andrei tried to treat his wife with whatever he could find. He washed her wound with river water and made splints out of sticks. The children gathered berries and mushrooms. But Elena's condition worsened. On the 4th day, she started running a fever. Andrei's voice grew even quieter. The wound became inflamed and infected. I knew that if we didn't find a doctor, she would die. He left the children with their mother and went to look for help. But the nearest village was 8 kilometers away along forest paths. He got lost and wasted a whole day. When he returned, it was too late. Elena died in her sleep. Andrei closed his eyes as if in physical pain. The children sat next to her and cried. Maxim said, "Dad, Mom isn't breathing." The investigator was silent. He had seen a lot of grief in his work, but this family's story touched him to the core. I buried her in a clearing near the forest. Andrei continued. The children helped carry stones for the grave. Anya put her favorite hair clip with her mother. But why didn't Andrei return with the children to the community after Elena's funeral? This question tormented the investigator the most. You understood that people were looking for you, that your relatives were worried, didn't you? He asked. Andrei was silent for a long time, finishing his cigarette. Then he looked up at the investigator. What was I supposed to tell them? The truth, it was an accident. No one was to blame. No one was to blame? Andrei stood up and began to pace the room. I took my family for a walk and led my wife to her death. I couldn't save her. My children were left without a mother because of me. There it was. The true face of tragedy. Andrei blamed himself for his wife's death and couldn't bear the condemnation of those around him. Imagine, I come and say, I'm sorry. My wife died in the forest from blood poisoning, and I sat there for 3 days and couldn't do anything. He continued excitedly. What will people think? What will they say to the children at school? His psychology was understandable. Andrei was not afraid of legal responsibility, but of moral condemnation. He preferred to disappear rather than explain himself. But how did you get out of the forest? Asked the investigator. A week after the funeral, we reached the road, replied Andrei. We hitched a ride to Yekaterinburg. I told the driver that our dacha had burned down and we had lost our documents. In 1995, it was easier to get new documents than it is now. Andrei went to the passport office with a statement about the loss and presented a certificate from his work. He had kept a copy. A month later, he received a new passport in the name of Andrei Nikitin. Where did you get the surname? The investigator asked. It's Elena's maiden name. I wanted to keep her memory alive. It was more difficult to register the children. Andrei couldn't declare them orphans. He needed death certificates for their parents. He had to act through acquaintances. I found a woman who agreed to register the children as her own in exchange for money, he said. Maxim became Mikhail Nikitin, and Anya became Anna. Then she handed them over to me as their guardian. The plan was risky, but it worked. Mikhail and Anna Nikitin appeared in the documents as being raised by their guardian, Andrei Nikitin, after their mother's death. What did you tell the children about their mother? That was the key question. Andrei stood by the window, looking out into the courtyard. I told them that their mother had fallen seriously ill and died in the hospital. That we needed to start a new life in another city to forget the pain. Did they believe you? Maxim suspected something. He was old enough to understand that something was wrong. But he kept quiet to protect his sister. The children grew up, getting used to their new names and new lives. Andrei worked as a security guard, a loader, a janitor, anywhere that didn't require references from his previous job. Maxim graduated from school and enrolled in a technical college to study programming, Andrei said proudly. Anya is studying medicine. They've grown up well, despite everything. They still don't know anything? They think their mother died of cancer, that I'm a single father who raised them after the tragedy. 15 years of lies. 15 years of fear that the truth would come out. Andrei had aged 20 years. His hair had turned gray, and his face was covered with deep wrinkles. Have you ever thought about telling them the truth? Asked the investigator. Every day, Andrei replied quietly. But how can I explain that their mother died in the forest, and I've been hiding it for 15 years? That their real names are Maxim and Anna Romanov? That they have grandparents who think they are dead? Indeed, telling the truth now would mean destroying the children's entire lives. They had grown up under different names, with new friends and new biographies. Returning to the past would be a shock. Where are your children now? Asked the investigator. Maxim rents an apartment in the center and works as a programmer at an IT company. Anna lives in a dormitory at a medical institute. Andrei took some worn photographs out of his pocket. Here they are. The photographs showed young people who bore a resemblance to the children in the 1995 family photo. Maxim had grown into a tall, broad-shouldered man, and Anya was a beautiful girl with light hair. Do they visit you often? Every weekend, Maxim helps out with money, and Anya cooks dinner. They're good kids, Andrei said, his voice filled with pain. They love me, and I lie to them every day. The investigator understood that a difficult conversation with Maxim and Anya lay ahead. How could he tell them that their entire lives were built on a lie? That their real mother was buried in the forest? That their relatives were looking for them? I need to see them, he said. Andrei nodded. I knew this day would come. Come tomorrow evening. I'll tell them we need to have an important talk. But the investigator didn't know the most important thing. How would they react to the truth? Would the children forgive their father for 15 years of deception? And were they ready to learn about their real past? The next evening, Investigator Krotov arrived at the Nikitin family home. Maxim turned out to be a serious young man with his father's attentive eyes. Anya had inherited her mother's light hair and open smile. Dad said you had an important conversation? Maxim asked, seating the investigator at the table. Anya poured tea, glancing at the guest with curiosity. She clearly had no idea that in a few minutes her world would be turned upside down. Yes, replied the investigator. Very important. Andrei sat pale, clenching his fists. He had been preparing for this moment for 15 years, but still didn't know where to start. Children, he said quietly. What you are about to hear will change your lives forever. Maxim became alert. Anya stopped pouring tea and looked intently at her father. Your mother did not die of cancer, Andrei continued. She died in the forest 15 years ago, and your real names are Maxim and Anna Romanov. There was silence. Maxim slowly put down his cup and stared at his father. Anya opened her mouth but didn't say a word. What does this mean? Maxim finally asked. And then Andrei told them the whole truth. About the boat trip that ended in tragedy. About their mother's death in the forest from blood poisoning. About his decision to flee with his children to avoid shame and condemnation. Anna cried as she listened to the story of her mother's last days. Maxim sat motionless, digesting the information. His face grew stony. You lied to us for 15 years, he said when his father finished his story. I wanted to protect you. Protect us from what? Maxim stood up from the table. From the truth? From our relatives? From our real names? Anya wiped away her tears and asked quietly, Do we have grandparents, uncles, and aunts? Yes, replied the investigator. Your mother's parents are alive. They still hope to find you. This news was the final blow for Andrei. He covered his face with his hands and cried for the first time in 15 years. I thought it would be better for everyone, he said through his tears. I couldn't bear the thought of people judging me for Elena's death. Maxim went to the window and stared at the city for a long time. Then he turned to his father. You were a coward. Instead of taking responsibility, you ran away. And you forced us to live someone else's life. His son's words hurt Andrei deeply, but he knew they were true. Anya suddenly stood up and hugged her father. But you loved us. You raised us alone, worked 3 jobs so we would have everything we needed. The family was falling apart before the investigators' eyes. 15 years of lies had divided them into those who could forgive and those who were not ready to forgive. What will happen now? Anya asked. You need to decide, the investigator replied. Do you want to restore your real documents, meet your mother's relatives, learn your true history? Maxim and Anya looked at each other. They had to make a choice that would determine their future. But the main question remained unanswered. Why didn't Andrei really return with the children after his wife's death? Was simple cowardice the only reason, or was there something else behind his decision? 3 days later, Maxim and Anya sat in the investigator's office, holding hands. They had decided to find out the truth about their past, no matter how painful it might be. We want to meet our mother's family, Anya said quietly, and get our real documents back. Maxim nodded, confirming his sister's words. We've been living under false names for 15 years. It's time to reclaim our real identities. Investigator Krotov understood that the upcoming meeting would be an emotional ordeal for everyone involved. Elena's parents, Vladimir and Galina Morozov, had spent 15 years in the dark about the fate of their daughter and grandchildren. The first phone call came like a bolt from the blue. Galina Petrovna, the investigator began cautiously. This is about your daughter Elena and her children. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then a quiet sob could be heard. Did you find them? Are they alive? Maxim and Anna are alive and well. But I have sad news about Elena. Telling her about her daughter's death was the hardest part. Galina Petrovna cried as she listened to the story of Elena's last days in the forest. Vladimir Vasilievich remained silent, clenching his fists in helplessness. "When can we see our grandchildren?" the grandmother asked through her tears. "Tomorrow, if you're ready." The meeting took place in a small cafe in the center of Yekaterinburg. Neutral territory was supposed to reduce the emotional tension. Vladimir and Galina Morozov arrived from Zarechye early in the morning. They had aged during 15 years of searching, but their eyes burned with the hope of finally embracing their grandchildren. Maxim and Anya entered the cafe right on time. Galina Petrovna immediately recognized her daughter's features in them. She stood up from the table, reaching out her arms. "Maximushka, Anya, my darlings." Anya rushed to her grandmother and hugged her tightly. Maxim approached more slowly, still trying to comprehend what was happening. "We thought you were dead," said the grandfather, stroking his grandson's shoulder. "We searched for 15 years, hoping—" An amazing scene unfolded at the table. Grandmother showed photos of Elena as a child and talked about her hobbies and dreams. Anya listened eagerly to stories about the mother she remembered only vaguely. "Your mother wanted to be a doctor," Galina Petrovna said, "but she married your father and became a teacher. She said that children are also medicine, only for the soul." Maxim was silent most of the time, studying his grandparents' faces. He found familiar features that he vaguely remembered from his early childhood. "What about your father?" asked his grandfather. "Where has he been all these years?" The question hung in the air. The children looked at each other, not knowing how to explain Andrei's actions. "He was afraid," Anya said quietly. "He thought he would be tried for my mother's death." "Tried?" Vladimir Vasilievich frowned. "For an accident?" And then the investigator realized that there was something Andrei was still hiding. The real reason for his escape lay deeper than simple cowardice. That evening, Krotov came to see Andrei again. The man looked exhausted. The children hadn't spoken to him since meeting their grandparents. "You haven't told me the whole truth," the investigator said bluntly. "What else happened in that forest?" Andrei shuddered and turned away toward the window. His hands were shaking as he lit another cigarette. "I don't understand what you're talking about." "You do understand. Cowardice cannot be the only reason for such an act." "What are you hiding?" There was a long silence. Andrei smoked, staring into the darkness outside the window. Then he said quietly, "I killed her." The investigator froze. These words completely changed the picture of what had happened. "How do you mean?" Andrei slowly turned to face him. His eyes revealed the pain he had been carrying for 15 years. "When the blood poisoning started, Elena asked me to end her suffering. She knew she was dying and didn't want to suffer. Euthanasia. That was what Andrei had been hiding all these years. He hadn't just failed to save his wife, he had helped her die. She said, 'Don't let me suffer, Andrei. The children don't need to see this.' Andrei's voice trembled. I gave her a large dose of painkillers from the tourist first aid kit. She fell asleep and never woke up. Now everything was falling into place. Andrei was afraid not of moral condemnation for an accident, but of criminal responsibility for murder. Even if it was committed out of mercy, did the children know about this? No. They were sleeping in the next room. They woke up when their mother was already dead. The investigator understood that legally it was murder, but morally it was an act of love and mercy toward a dying person. That's why I couldn't go back," Andrei continued. "How could I explain to the investigators that I gave my wife a lethal dose of medication? Who would believe that it was out of compassion? Indeed, In 1995, Russian society was not ready to understand euthanasia. Andrei would have faced prison, and his children would have been sent to an orphanage. So you disappeared with your children? Yes. I thought it would be better for everyone. The children would think that their parents had died in an accident. Elena's relatives would come to terms with their loss, and I would bear my cross alone. But the plan didn't work. For 15 years, Andrei was tormented by guilt. His children grew up without knowing the truth about their mother, and her parents suffered from not knowing what had happened to her. You must tell the children about this, said the investigator. Andrei shook his head. They hate me already. Why add more pain? Because lies have already destroyed your family. Only the whole truth can fix things. The next day, the whole family gathered again in the investigator's office. Maxim and Anya sat next to their grandparents. Andrei sat apart, like an outcast. Your father has something to add to the story, the investigator began. Andrei raised his head heavily and looked at the children. Your mother didn't just die of blood poisoning. She asked me to help her go without suffering. There was silence. Anya looked at her father in confusion. Maxim frowned, trying to comprehend what he had heard. What does that mean? He asked. I gave her medicine so she would fall asleep and not wake up. Andrei replied quietly. She asked me to do it herself. Galina Petrovna began to cry. Vladimir Vasilievich clenched his fists. They understood. Their son-in-law had not only concealed their daughter's death, but had also caused it. You killed our mother? Anya stared at her father with wide eyes. No. Maxim stood up and approached his father. He freed her from her suffering. His son's unexpected support stunned Andrei. He had expected curses, but instead received understanding. I work with medical programs, Maxim explained. I know what blood poisoning without antibiotics is like. Mom was dying in agony. Dad did what a man should do. Anya also stood up and took her father's hand. You carried this pain alone for 15 years. We should be ashamed that we didn't understand you right away. The family began to heal. The truth, however terrible it was, united them more strongly than the lies. But there remained a legal question. Andrei had technically committed murder, albeit out of mercy. What to do with this knowledge? Investigator Krotov made a Solomonic decision. Elena Romanova died of blood poisoning as a result of an open fracture, he wrote in his conclusion. The circumstances of her death are consistent with an accident. Not a word was mentioned about Elena's last moments. Some truths are better left within the family. A month later, Maxim and Anya received their restored documents with the surname Romanov. They decided to keep the names they had grown accustomed to over the past 15 years. Mikhail and Anna Romanov, Anya said, looking at her new passport. It sounds strange, but it's right. Maxim got a new job under his real name. Anya transferred to a medical institute in Zareche to be closer to her mother's grave. Andrei remained in Yekaterinburg. The children forgave him, but he could not forgive himself. 15 years of deception did not pass without a trace. We will visit you, Maxim said before leaving. You are our father, no matter what. And we love you, added Anya, for raising us, for protecting us from the truth when we weren't ready. There is now a real monument on Elena's grave. Vladimir and Galina Morozov visit every week, sometimes with their grandchildren. Maxim became a successful programmer, got married, and had a son. He named him Andrei, after his grandfather. Anya graduated from medical school and works as a doctor at the district hospital in Zarechi. She often says, "I treat people just like my mother wanted." Andrei remained a security guard in Yekaterinburg. He drinks tea in the evenings, looking at family photos. Sometimes his children call and tell him about their lives. He still cannot forgive himself for Elena's death, but he has learned to live with the pain. The story of the Romanov family has become known in a small circle. Some condemn Andrei for his cowardice. Others understand his choice. Investigator Krotov believes that there are no winners or losers in this story. There are only people who, at a critical moment, did what their hearts told them to do. Was Andrei right to hide the truth about his wife's death? Did he have the right to help Elena end her life without suffering? Should the children have known the truth from childhood? The boat Zarechi 7 is still stored in the evidence warehouse. Sometimes criminalistic students come to study the case as an example of a complex family tragedy. Nothing else was found at the bottom of the flooded quarry. But local residents say that sometimes in the evenings, children's voices and a woman's laughter can be heard there. Perhaps these are echoes of that happy day on August 22, 1995, when the Romanov family was together for the last time, enjoying life. Maxim recently brought his son to his grandmother's grave. 3-year-old Andreyusha placed a bouquet of wildflowers on the gravestone and asked, "Grandpa, was Grandma Lena kind?" "Very kind," replied Maxim, stroking his son's head. "She loved children more than anything else in the world." The boy nodded and ran to his grandfather Volodya, who was showing him photos of his mother as a child. Life goes on. The pain subsides. The truth, no matter how painful, ultimately frees people from the burden of lies. But the main question that concerns everyone who learns this story remains. What would you do in Andrei Romanov's place? Would you tell the truth right away, risking prison and condemnation? Or would you choose the path of silence to protect your children from the terrible truth? Write in the comments what decision you think is right. And remember, in life, there are no simple answers to complex questions.